Welcome to A Seat at the Table, and today we have Mel Rowsell on the podcast, and we're so excited to have a conversation with you, Mel. So thanks for being on the podcast with us.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. I'm stoked to be here.
Yeah, it's gonna be good.
So we've got some quick fire questions
Sure.
to get the brain going. Are you ready?
Yes, I am.
What are you reading or listening to right now?
I am reading a great book called The Four Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin.
Ooh.
It's a really great book. It's talking about how you relate to expectations, internal expectations that you have of yourself, and external expectations that other people have of you. And it talks about the four tendencies that there are. I am a rebel. So it's
That's
quite
awesome.
liberating reading this book and realising that there are other rebels as well. So no tendency. So
They call me the rebel with no cause.
I've written that down. I need to read this
It's
book.
a great book. It's
Awesome.
a really good book. Yeah.
So following on from that, fiction or non-fiction?
Always non-fiction.
Same. Same. New Zealand or abroad?
Abroad. Probably Italy.
Oh,
Oh my gosh.
yes. Yes, same.
Get me there now. Party with 100 or 5 people?
5 people, for sure.
Love it. Peacemaker or constructive debater?
Peacemaker.
Nice.
Every time, pretty much. Yeah.
Meditator or full exerciser?
Walking the dogger. Does that
Love it. Yes.
like a little bit of both?
I love it. And if the people closest to you were to describe your most relaxed, what would that be?
Sleeping.
Nice.
I love nothing more than just to lie in and have a little afternoon snoozle. Or if I'm awake, most relaxed doing word puzzle books.
Oh.
I just love word puzzle books.
Yeah.
Ultimate in indulgence.
Has Wordle hooked you?
Yes.
I also thought that too.
I won't tell you about today's.
Oh, the addiction to the Wordle. Love it. And last one, if you could invite one person to dinner tonight, dead or alive, who would that be and why?
Well, I'm not going to say one person. I'm going to say 2 people. I'm going to say the Dalai Lama, because I think the Dalai Lama would be great to talk to. And secondly, I would say my nana, who passed away when I was about 15 or something, because I would love to have a conversation with her.
That's special.
Beautiful. Love that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Now we get into the serious questions.
Yeah. now the real work begins.
Yeah. Hang on, do I have to go? That was lovely, lady.
So we're going to start with a beautiful open question. Who is Mel?
Oh God.
Maybe a bit about your background, your passions, and what life looks like now.
Okay. So, well, I always think the most important thing to say about me is that I'm a mother of 2 absolutely delightful daughters and a bonus stepson as well. So that is by far the most important thing in my life. Other than that, I have a wonderful partner, Simon, who's my partner in crime, who we get up to all sorts of fun stuff together. And then there's the worky stuff as well. So leadership coach and leadership facilitator. Very interested in human connection. So, yeah, everything to do with what makes people tick, and individually and in groups as well. So my background has been in HR, pretty much like professionally. And strangely enough, for people who know me now, in the health sector originally. And then I had about, a decade-ish with Vend, a high growth startup, scaling that with my ex-husband Vaughan. And now I get to work with amazing people doing amazing things essentially doing my passion in life, day to day. So, but life for me is so much more than work. So I'm currently my partner and I have just recently bought a place on Waiheke, the old Rocky Bay store, which burnt down 20 years ago.
Wow.
And it's our mission to bring that back. So we are there on the weekends, chopping down things, renovating, talking to architects, trying to understand how we can revive this store. So that's like a major focus in life at the moment as well. So I have like schooly into things going on always.
And with the store though, that's been interesting too, because you've really taken quite a community approach there, or tried to consult to know, as part of figuring out.
Yeah, that's right. Because when you take on a project like that, well, first of all, I think that Simon and I are the custodians on it. It's coming up to its 100-year anniversary of when it was originally built, and my dream for that is that in 100 years it'll still be there. And long after I've gone, there'll be a little thing on some plaque in the store. Mel Rowsell and her partner Simon Thompson built it back after the fire in 2003. And so I just love being a part of that. So it is a real community adventure. So we had a community hui at the beginning of January to find out what people wanted from that store. What people didn't want, and it's just awesome.
Why the store? Why that store? Why that
That's
project?
a great question. Ask the store, because I think the store chose us.
Really?
I saw the store there.
Yeah.
Saw it on Trade Me like months before we looked at it, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then it kind of disappeared, and then it came back again. And so Simon and I were looking around on Waiheke for places to buy, and we went there and just immediately fell in love with it. And like I'm not super woo woo, hey, like kind of like on the fringes of it maybe. But I reckon that store, it has a feeling and an energy. And that store and I belong together somehow. I don't quite know how, but there's a real deep connection there, which is beyond a cognitive kind of, it is a sensible thing to do. It's like a real heartfelt connection.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so that's why.
Pretty special.
Yeah.
It's special.
Yeah.
And it's so obvious that, things outside of work mean so much to you, and you love having projects outside of that, which is cool. But I'd love to know, what is something you wish you knew at the start of your career or business journey?
I wish I knew that you can choose for yourself, if you want to focus on jobs that you enjoy and that play to your strengths. Because occasionally when I was younger, I took a job for the title. This job will sound good on my CV. and didn't really enjoy it, and wasn't really in this, playing to my strengths. And I wish that I had the knowledge back then that to just go for the things that were uniquely aligned to my strengths and my personality and the way that I operate, and rather than trying to shove myself as a round peg into a square hole. Now, whether 20 years ago that, because it's easy for me to say that now at 48, right? When I was 28, maybe the decisions that I made were right for me at that time. But if I could, I would just ask myself a few poignant questions to make sure that I had taken those things into consideration.
And how do you know what your strengths are?
Well, I think that if I sort of extrapolate that out to other people, I would say that you should look around at what other people are saying to you that your strengths are.
Yeah, well.
Because quite often women are particularly bad at this, you know, with the old imposter syndrome. So I think looking around at other people and hearing what they're saying and imagining for a moment that it was true and what that would mean for you.
That's real practical.
And also thinking about when you are at your best. So some of the things that you've achieved and how you've achieved that, or when you feel like really in your flow and what you're doing at that time. Yeah, so it's a bit of introspection, but also talking to people who you trust, who know you, and asking them what your strengths are.
That's so interesting.
When you're in your flow, that's really such an important thing to remember, because you don't actually know when you're in your flow, but to stop and realise you're doing what you naturally love.
So you know, one thing that you quite often know is you quite often will know when you're not in your flow.
Yes.
And so that's quite an interesting way to start thinking about what is you in flow, to start thinking about the corollary of when am I not in flow. And then that can actually start your brain thinking about these things which are quite difficult to think about when you're stuck in the BAU of life all the time.
But the other really interesting thing, you know, listening to you say that is it takes, you know, you need to be reflective and give yourself time to do that and not just get caught up in things and keep doing and just stop and just stop and ask people something.
I would say that you don't need to do anything. You know, like if you don't want to do it and if you're not that way inclined, good for you. You know, I need to do that for me because I'm like one of life's seekers. You know, sometimes I wish I wasn't. You know, it would make life so much easier, in my opinion, if I could just get up, go to work, come home, go to bed, and not think about the whole kind of meta condition of being alive.
And you're probably right. I mean, for some people, work may just be exactly that, and the rest of their life is different. But they just get up in the morning and they go to work, and it doesn't really matter that much what they're doing.
That's right, because they have a different value set, different experience, different work means different things to them or whatever. I hadn't thought about it either until a few years ago. And then I thought, well, hang on, because I'm always harping on about how everyone is different. And I thought, shit, maybe people are different in this way as well. And I think that they are. And let's be frank, ladies, being able to sit here and talk about the existentialism of thinking about your life and work is a very privileged thing to do, isn't it? You know, so you know, but yeah, I have no idea how we got onto this conversation.
That's what it's all about. Welcome.
That's right. Yes. This whole needing to, you know, like, this whole like you have to do this or you have to do that. No, screw that. Just do the thing that's right for you.
Love that.
Yeah. Very, 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 very true.
Yeah, that's awesome. Mountaintop moment and deep valley challenge.
Oh God. Okay. So I would say, probably two mountaintop moments, like a macro and micro.
Yep, love that.
Probably macro level was when we finally managed to get the ink on the sale of Vend to Lightspeed, just because it had been such an enormous part of my life and I really didn't know what was going to happen, and then something major happened and it was like, thank Christ. Excuse me, my terrible language. But it was like so that was like a high. But that was kind of like a real sort of macro, you know, major life moment sort of high. Now, on the flip side of that, the thing that really gets me out of bed actually is when I'm coaching someone and they have a major breakthrough that changes their whole lives.
Wow.
And that is amazing. And often that has got to do with women and confidence. And these women are there genuinely believing that they can't do something or they're no good at something or whatever. And then, you know, a few months later I'll get a message out of the blue going, oh my God, Mel, I wouldn't have even considered applying for this job before I met you. Now I've applied for it, I've got it, and I'm loving it.
Awesome.
And I'm like, hello. I mean, that is, you know, and maybe I get these messages, I don't know, 3 times a year or something, just unsolicited. And though, I mean, can you get anything better than that professionally? It's just wonderful. Yeah.
Have you always been, like even when you were little, were you this person that had this intuitive human connection?
Yeah.
Right.
I think so.
I
think so.
It's innate in you.
I see it. I see the exact same thing in my daughter Summer, who's 15. Yeah.
Goosebumps.
Like this morning, she had to phone me. We were in the house together, but she couldn't find me. She phoned me to tell me about her dream that she had last night because it couldn't wait. You know, and I always smell. I've got a beautiful gardenia outside my front door. I always smell flowers.
Yeah.
And yesterday I was taking her out. She walked past it. She stopped. She turned around and she went to smell the gardenia. And that is exactly what I was always like when I was little.
Yeah.
So always like just, I don't know, plugged in or something to the there's this kind of invisible fabric in life or something. There's more there if you have this innate curiosity about life and about people and about everything. So I think I wouldn't have been able to answer that question, but now I see so much of myself in her.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's and it's the things you stop and notice, and then when you see Summer doing that, you think,
I was like, that's right. And I have a wonderful friend of mine, Sandra, and she's amazing. And I think it was last year I had to have a conversation that I really didn't want. I was dealing with a really difficult situation, and I knew that I could do it, but I also knew that a large amount of how I felt about it was my state going into it. So I phoned her and I said, Sandra, I'm getting ready for this meeting that I have to have this afternoon. What do you think I should do? She said, Mel, go for a swim. Go down to the ocean, have a swim and put your head under.
Wow.
And I thought, this is the best advice ever. So I got into my togs, went down there, had a swim, put my head under, changed my state instantly.
Awesome.
Came back and nailed this meeting. And it's like, it is like not the kind of typical advice that but it was, you know.
Equally, you could have completely ignored it and said, "You're don't be ridiculous."
But the moment she said that, I thought, of course, I need to immerse myself in nature, change my state, you know, and realise that this meeting, it's a big deal, but it's not that big a deal. You know, the ocean's always there. You can always go for a swim, no matter if you've had a bad day or whatever. And yeah.
How'd the meeting go?
Really good. really good. And
remember that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And you know, there are other ways of changing your state as well, but that is a really powerful one.
Particularly if it's cold.
Yeah, that's right.
So I suppose it doesn't really matter. And what about the Deep Valley Challenge?
So I would say the Deep Valley challenges that I have had, I walked away from a job because I screwed up giving someone some feedback so poorly, and then they got like aggressive and defensive, rightly so, because I didn't do a very good job of it. And then they said something to me, then I generalised that feedback to my whole being, my whole job, and I resigned my job.
Wow.
And that is not a deep valley because of the fact that I resigned my job, because I don't really like that job all that much. Well, that was one of these jobs I shouldn't have taken. But it was the fact, and now these days when people talk to me about thinking about leaving something, it was the fact that I allowed myself to be pushed away. It was this out of controlledness, which I try and be the master of my emotions. And in that moment that was out of control, I completely let that feedback, I didn't right size the feedback. I obviously hadn't done the work to understand how these things work internally. And so I felt like shit. I felt terrible. I resigned my job with no other job to go to. And yeah, it was awful.
How would you do it differently?
Wow. I would. So let's say, I mean, first of all, I would give the feedback differently. However, let's say that I gave the feedback beautifully and this still came back at me. I would right size it. I would realise that I've just been given some feedback, and I would try and understand it in the context and realise that it was about this particular thing. It wasn't about me personally, it was about me in the context of work. It was about me in the context of work, in the context of this particular thing. I would have the courage to go and talk to that person to try and understand it a little bit more, maybe, you know, apologise for the way that I had given the feedback. I would have self-compassion and realise that it is okay to screw things up, and we do screw things up. None of us are perfect. And so when things go wrong, to treat yourself nicely. So, and maybe I would choose to leave that job, but I would have liked, what I've learnt is that I think when you choose to move on from something, it should be because you're ready and there's something new that you're being drawn to, as opposed to you're feeling like you're being pushed. Like you're pushing yourself, or someone is pushing you, or something like that. So I would say in terms of a deep valley, again, you know, I mean, transactionally, you know, growing Vend was hard. There's a lot of hard work and blah 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 blah. But that was just like hard graft. But in terms of a deep valley of that thing that's difficult, and by the way, ladies, one of my values is that I'm quite committed to honesty. So that's what was pretty much the hardest thing for me. So that's why doing this is quite scary because I can't sit here and it would be against my values to sit here and not be truthful.
Can I ask some practical advice?
Sure.
What if you feel like you're being pushed away? What do you do?
Well, you decide what you want to do.
Yeah.
So, if you feel like you're being pushed away, why do you feel that way? I assume that someone is doing some behaviour that makes you feel like you're being pushed away. I'd try and understand what that behaviour is, so that you can, and then maybe like run it past someone to have that sanity check. I feel like I'm being pushed away because this person's doing this, that and the other thing. What's your read on this situation to see whether the judgment you're making about I'm being pushed away is actually, is there another way of looking at that, or are you putting a filter over it? So I would do that. Then, here you go, here's a pro move. I would go, this is perfect. This is an ideal situation because if I feel like I'm going to be pushed away, then I'm probably going to end up leaving. So I might as well take this as a major learning opportunity and try on all of these behaviours that I'm too scared to try on because I think they might get me fired. I might make enemies. I don't know how I'm going. It's like I'm too
what have I got to lose?
You have nothing to lose, and that's the point. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain.
Yeah.
Wow,
so you're not
brilliant.
going to be a dick about it.
Yeah.
You're not going to lose
yourself.
friendships.
Yeah, but
equally, if you think, I would really like to be able to actually speak my voice, you have suddenly, the universe has given you a wonderful learning opportunity to practice that, and you literally have nothing to lose at all.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Love it. Do you hear that, listeners?
That is gold. Oh my
It is gold.
Yeah, that's so good. I love this next question. What do people misunderstand about you the most, Mel?
Oh, okay. Two things. And again, it's like a professional thing and a personal thing.
Yeah, great.
So, professionally, people don't really understand the role that I had in Vend. People will go, like kind of semi-invisible.
Wow.
Well, probably more than semi-invisible, like mostly invisible.
So is that environment?
What do you mean?
Well, in other words, I guess I can't understand why that was, given how important what you did in that business was.
I think at the time I had quite a big dose of imposter syndrome.
Okay.
So I think partly it was probably me not putting myself forward, and then I don't think you can understand that Vend story without also understanding my story, because then Vaughan and I separated. And so it was kind of like a real family thing, and then we separated, and then obviously it's that, and so the story got more complicated than it otherwise had to be. So the other thing that people misunderstand about me is that some people think I'm I don't know, some fancy person. Really, I'm just like a big goof. I'm just, some people some people might go, oh my God, Mel, I've heard such great things about you, and that's lovely. But I went through a whole summer at my batch in the Coromandel with mismatched jandals. And not just mismatched.
Did you know they were mismatched?
Two right jandals.
No.
Because my left jandals kept breaking. And I had two right jandals, and they worked okay. They kept my feet, just safe and comfortable. So I just wore two right jandals for like a couple of weeks, a few summers ago. And that's really, that is more me than any of this other stuff. So, yes.
There's a pragmatic thing about that too, right?
I am extremely
Why go by two?
pragmatic. That's right, exactly. I've got some jandals.
Let's use them.
And then on about the second day, my partner Simon said, oh, for God's sakes, Mel, honestly, what are you doing? It's like,
why not?
That's right, yeah.
Oh, that's so funny. This is so much fun, this conversation. I love that was your example of being a goof. It was a great one. Next question we've got here is, what does a seat at the table mean to you?
I think at the end of the day, a seat at the table means being involved in decisions and having influence. So, when you are in those conversations and you get to have your say, and then that leads to some kind of decision that influences something, then I think that is a seat at the table.
Yeah, totally. And has there ever been a moment where you're like in a situation and you're like, okay, I don't have a seat at this table, or that sense of feeling like you don't have a seat at the table?
Oh, many.
Interesting.
But it's interesting because I think, from my experience and also talking to other women who are also have a physical seat at the table, there is a big difference between having a physical seat at the table and actually leaning in and taking that seat at the table, because that requires courage. So I have been, like the only woman on, tables with all blokes, and also because I've been involved in tech for quite a few years, but I'm not really a techie person. I think I think about things differently.
Yeah.
And so that requires courage. And also, I mean, it's different now, but when I was at Vend, I was older. I was older, I was the mother of two, I lived in the suburbs, and I didn't know how to code anything. And so I was a very sort of diverse voice at that table. And so, and other women I've spoken to have been in that same situation, and so it takes courage to actually let the words leave your mouth that you would like to say.
Wow.
So easy to swallow your words, it's so easy to sit there and think of things, but then not to say it out loud. And because of the environment that we work in, and the fact that a lot of decisions happen in meetings, if you're in that situation where for whatever reason you find it difficult to contribute when you're sitting around the table, then unfortunately you don't have the impact that you could have. So I think that there's sitting at the table and then actively kind of contributing whilst sitting at the table, and those things are equally as important. So have I felt that I haven't had a seat at the table? Sometimes. But more often I have felt like I've had my seat at the table, but it's been difficult to actually contribute.
Activate it. Wow.
Yeah.
So
What gives you the courage to contribute, or to actually lean in and have that real seat at the table? What gives Mel that courage to?
Well, these days I just think fuck it.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
So that's relatively easy. Okay, I've learnt to do this thing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to describe it to you, and then hopefully maybe we can talk about it. It's kind of interesting. But so you're sitting there, okay? You've got something to say, and you've formulated this thought in your mind, but then there's all these stories running around in your head about what's going to happen if you say that thing. Should you say it? Will you appear silly? Maybe people won't listen to you. Maybe the conversation moved on a minute ago and you think it's too late.
Yep.
Who are you to say this? These people are much more experienced than you are. They might not listen to you. I've only been in the job for 6 months. Have hardly got my feet under the table. I'm not really qualified to say anything yet, etc., etc., etc. Okay, blah, blah, blah.
All the why shouldn't I?
That's right. All the why shouldn't these, exactly. And yet these words are kind of in there. They're in there. And what you need to do, ladies, is you need to open up your mouth and say these words in spite of everything that's going around in your head. You just open up your mouth and make the words with your mouth and make them come out as sounds. And then it's like a little experiment. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're not going to judge whether this is good or bad. We're just going to observe what happens.
Wow.
Okay, so what happens when we say these words? Do people stop and do people listen to us? Do we get a question? Do they ignore us? Does it take us on a different tangent? How does it feel for you having said the words? And so we're just going to do an experiment. It's not good, it's not bad, it's not anything. You just said the words, and then we're going to learn from that for next time. But then you're like running all these little micro experiments where you're just saying the thing, and you just say it. So most people that I coach are very, very lovely people, very nice people, very unassuming, intelligent women, ambitious, talented. And one thing I say to them is, you know what? If if you go along to one of these meetings and you say, I'm about to be a bit inappropriate here, by the way, and you say something which is out of character, like very blunt, because you're running these little experiments, they'll probably just think that you've got the period. They'll probably just like, oh my God, what was up with Mel? So again, we're in the nothing to lose category. Because if you're reliably a lovely person, and then you run one of these experiments, they're just going to go, oh, she didn't sleep very well. She's Aunt Flo's obviously come to visit.
Oh my gosh.
I encourage people just to do that, and I still do it. I still find it hard sometimes. I was just in a meeting the other day, and we were having a meeting, and then we were inviting other people into the meeting to ask them some questions. And there was a question that we were going to ask them, which was a bit controversial. Anyway, but I agreed that this question should be asked, but I hadn't been one of the people that had suggested the question being asked, right? So we're having this nice conversation for like 5 or 10 minutes, things were wrapping up, and no one had asked the question. And I thought, I'm just going to ask the question. So I just asked the question, and it was fine. Did I feel uncomfortable? Yes.
Yeah.
Did I feel that it was, a nice question? No, it was a bit hard-hitting, but I asked it in a nice way. And they answered it, and we continued. And I thought, well, there you go.
How do you deal with the overthinking, though? Like, so you've done the experiment, and then you personally go home and you overthink what you've said or what the outcome was. Is there anything practical there?
Yeah. The old overthinking, that's a terrible thing, isn't it?
It is. I feel like it's one thing to say it and you're like, yep, I've done that, tick that off. But then for those that go home or leave that situation and think, oh, I should have said this, or what does that person think about me? It all happens to all of us, I feel.
Yeah. Look, I think, I don't have it on today, but I do have a little bracelet that has the word self-compassion on it.
Sure. And
I think that it's really important to practice that self-compassion, especially if you're an overthinker.
Yeah.
Because none of us are perfect.
Yeah.
And let's face it, here I am, like I'm the subject of this podcast. What are the chances, ladies, that when I'm driving home, I think, oh shit, why did I say that?
Yeah.
Oh my God, what are these people going to think of me? The fact that I said that thing, was I too vulnerable? Oh no, did I? Oh, maybe I should ring that person in. The chances of that happening are quite high.
Yeah.
Right? And so I just go, well, she'll be okay. I'm a good person. It's all right. I did the best that I could. I showed up how I wanted to show up. I can't control how other people think of it. And just have a bit of self-compassion, and realise as well that half of the things, because I reckon in your voice you've got the inner coach, in your head you've got the inner coach and the inner critic. Right? And normally when you are overthinking things, it's your inner critic. So realising that, and realising that that's okay for it to be there, but it's probably spouting a load of bullshit. You don't need to listen to it.
So Mel, maybe talk about the human connection, and what is it, and how can leaders do it better or do it well?
I think the human connection is connecting on a human level, and I think it is the antidote to all the data-driven logic head stuff that is out there in the world today, which is kind of outweighing all the other stuff. And so I reckon at the end of the day, personally and professionally, we're just all human beings trying to do our best, trying to work with other human beings. And especially when we are in a work context, we are a group or a team of people who've come together to try and achieve something, right? hopefully inspired by an exciting vision or mission about how you want to change the world, and the extent to which you can connect and influence and understand and communicate well and inspire and endear trust and all of this stuff in the people around you, the better you can work together to achieving that goal. So, like when I talk about the human connection, or you know, like this kind of whole way of being, I think there's three things. First of all is that connection to yourself, so self-mastery, which we've been talking about a lot of. A lot of what we've talked about today has kind of been in that sphere. And then the second one is like this kind of human-to-human intelligence, like you and one other person, or two other people, right? So how are you going to get on, inspire, motivate that person? And then the third one is like creating an environment where people can thrive, because you can't. It's very well, you know, Liz, if you are, you know, all over the self-mastery thing, you're great with your team, but you're working in an environment that doesn't support you in that. It's very difficult to sustain that human connection. It kind of gets eaten away. So, yeah.
And how important is this to driving the success of a business?
Oh, like super important, I think. I mean, I'm not saying that it's not important to get a product market fit. It's not important to, you know, get your sales humming along. It's not important to do your marketing or whatever. Of course, those things are important. But I think that when you look at organisations that have all of those things going well, the ones that tend to go well are the ones that have got a great human connection. The ones that tend to crash and burn are the ones that don't. And sometimes that can happen quite quickly. Well, sometimes it can be a slow burn. For example, you hire a toxic manager and then you don't deal with them, and then all your good people leave. And sometimes it can be quite a fast burn, like you are a founder and you can't have the difficult conversations, and then you lose your investment deal because you've screwed up some high stakes conversation with a potential investor. Yeah,
it's interesting. Where do you see most leaders and owners going wrong in their team culture, and any advice for sort of crafting their culture?
Yeah, so look, I think that there are a couple of models that kind of say the same thing, and I'm going to answer this one with a model because then it's kind of easier for people to conceptualise.
I love it.
But you've got, what's her name? Psychological safety lady. Anyway, her name will come to me. So she talks about a model where on the y-axis, you've got psychological safety, and on the y-axis you've got motivation and accountability, right? And where and so within these two axes you get kind of 4 quadrants. You get one quadrant where you have neither psychological safety nor a focus on accountability and results. Okay, so this is a real laissez-faire kind of thing, like the apathy zone. You might see this in an organisation where, I don't know, maybe it's founder-led, but the founder has kind of, you know, lost all motivation, or maybe it's an older organisation and it's in time, you know, it's you know, time for some new blood, and that new blood hasn't come in yet. Then you get this kind of country club kind of zone where it's a real comfort zone where you get high psychological safety. It's a beautiful place to work. You attend to everyone's human needs. It's wonderful.
Lovely.
Doesn't it? Sounds even better because there's no accountability, no focus on results or anything like that. So you just have a wonderful time.
Everybody's happy.
Like, everyone is happy, but you maybe not necessarily meeting your deadlines. Your customers might get a bit pissed because you're not delivering things. Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is, you can imagine as a founder or as a CEO or as a leader, this could be quite tempting to do this because it feels so lovely, but you're not having those conversations about results, and neither are you setting up your organisation with things like goals and KPIs and performance measures and all of those sorts of things, right? So then you get the opposite of that, where you get something which is probably more common, where you get the anxiety zone, or like produce and perish, where it's all about the results and it's not really very high on psychological safety, right? Yeah. So you're creating an environment where you have to get the results done. People don't really feel safe about taking a risk, about speaking up about something, you know, they don't want to stay there. So again, it can be quite easy to do this as a founder or as a leader if you're just all about the results, but you don't take that time to build the relationships, to focus on your communication, to focus on building a team and how you're going to work together and playing people's strengths and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, you have where you want to be, which is what this lady talks about is the learning zone, or like team management, where you've got high psychological safety and a high focus on results. So where people often go wrong is that they will either have too much focus on results without attending to the personal relationships, or vice versa.
It's like that tightrope that someone else, again, I can't remember who talks about this, but you know, walking that fine line between, you know, high empathy and results driven.
Yeah, that's right.
And, you know, it is one of the challenges of leadership, I suppose, is striking that balance.
Yeah, and I think, you know, especially because for some people leadership comes easily, and that's great. For other people, leadership doesn't come easily, and if they're not prepared to work at it, then they will get what they get. You know, they will get a culture that is the sum of all of the parts that they put into it. And so, not to say that anyone is the perfect leader, but to have some awareness about how you turn up, what your buttons are and how to mitigate them, how other people perceive you. Really, who cares about how you perceive yourself and relation to other people, because quite often it's a bit wrong. And then doing the work on it is really important.
So interesting. So I feel like that country club sort of feel, it's really just wanting people to like you, right? But I'm sure, like, you know, someone being like, oh, I just don't want to have those hard conversations because I want everyone to like me as a leader. It must come to a point where it's like, well, actually now your people are turning around and going, please, I need some accountability, or what am I doing here? What's my job?
That's right. Yeah. Especially if you have got a real high flyer who wants to achieve a whole lot of stuff, it would be very frustrating for them.
Yeah, it would be. So I can't imagine it working very well long term, that sort of...
No. You wouldn't be making any money, so...
Yeah, true. You probably wouldn't even be there at some point.
Exactly. But people don't... If I talk to people about this, they'll often have a startling moment of realisation and go, oh my God, that's what we are. We're a bit like this. Because you don't really think about it. And so then we do the steps to like, okay, well, let's create some goals and let's say what people are achievable for, and then let's have meetings or some kind of communication so that we can have see whether we've achieved our goals, and let's put in a KPI so that you know whether you're doing what you're supposed to be doing in your job. Like, how do you know if you're actually succeeding? And it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all if you've got that high psychological safety.
But there's also a sense sometimes that it's an either or and not a by end. We couldn't possibly be up on the far end of accountability and results and have be a fun place to work.
This is what everyone says to me if I'm talking them through this model as a way of making sense of their culture. They'll go, oh my God, so we are this country club thing. We've got to dial back on the psychological safety.
Right.
It's like, no, you want to keep that high and dial up the other one.
That has to go down.
That's right.
The answer is no.
No, not at all. Yeah, in fact, if anything, if you've got high psychological safety, leverage that.
Absolutely.
And if you're on the other thing and you've got high focus on results, leverage that and make psychological safety a goal for your organisation. Leverage your strengths.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So interesting. Diversity.
Yes.
What are the benefits of diversity in thought within business? You mentioned before in the conversation, you sat in maybe meetings at Vend, and you weren't a coder yourself. You didn't know lots about tech, or maybe you did, but you came in from a different perspective.
Yeah.
What are the benefits of diversity in thought in business, and how can leaders foster the environment of diversity in thinking and learning and ideas and that sort of thing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the diversity of thought is simply that you get different ways of thinking about things, right? And I read this or heard about this thing ages ago when YouTube first came out. So some people were complaining that their YouTube videos always played upside down, and they couldn't figure it out. Why most people it played right way up, but then every now and again a complaint would come through that it was upside down. They couldn't understand it. But they finally figured out what it was that all of the developers were right-handed. So when you're right-handed, you hold your phone, you turn it around one way, but when you're left-handed, you turn it around the other way. And this was obviously before the days when it sort of flipped around automatically. So the poor left-handers amongst us had I'm not left-handed, the upside-down video. So
that's crazy.
Isn't it funny?
Yeah.
And so there is an example of diversity of thought.
Yeah.
And that is not gender, not age, not ethnicity, but left-handed, right-handed.
Yeah.
Right. And what comes through, and that when you work through with a diverse group of people, and so I just think the other thing I was thinking in preparation for this is if you don't have that diversity of thought, unless your customers look exactly like you, how are you representing your customers? So
love that. I've never thought of that actually, and it is so logical.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, you see it all being women.
Yes.
When men design things for women.
Yes.
That doesn't work.
You have to explicitly ask questions when you're trying to make decisions about things. Well, how would someone who is left-handed handle this?
That's right.
And you kind of have to create those, put it out there, questions that say, are we thinking about this through a whole bunch of different lenses?
That's right. And so that's the other point that I was going to make, is that diverse, great, if you can stack your bench full of people with diversity of thought, great. If you can't, then you want to have the questions handy to think about things in different ways. And if you think about De Bono's thinking hats, he's got the black hat's the naysayer, the white hat's the facts, and then you've got blue process, red intuition, yellow I think optimistic, and green creative. I think. So anyway, you can ask questions like a creative question. What is there? How could we look at this thing differently? How are our, what would we do if we supersize this opportunity? What are we not seeing here? And then so that's one way of looking at things, the De Bono's thinking hats. But then there are many, many other ways of thinking about things as well. Old David Rock has got his thingamajiggy. focusy question thingies. I can't remember exactly what they're called now, but choose your focus, that's what it's called. And so he's got vision questions, and then planning questions, detail questions, problem questions. So, you know, you can have those questions as well. And being able to think about, you know, or if you are all men, then think about, you know, well, how is this, well, invite a woman in, you know, and, but to have, at least being able to ask a question immediately will get your brain thinking in a different way, because we tend to think in the same kind of patterns of thought. We have our favourite ways of thinking about things. So as a group, you want to be able to inject some new thinking in there.
It takes me back to the comment about human connection. I think if you have that and you know your team well, you will know where your gaps in thinking are, and where your tendencies will be, and you can actually be really deliberate, saying, you know, Briar, today can you wear a black hat, because nobody usually wears that hat because we're such an optimistic bunch, or
right,
you know, or we're a really pragmatic, analytical bunch. So can you wear the creative hat today?
Yes.
Like, ask people to wear
Yes,
it.
yeah, absolutely.
You know,
love that.
You know, or and we do it, you know, with some of the team profiles. We know where our gaps are, and so you need somebody, you know, we might need to have a green meeting because we're not actually got nobody that's particularly strong in that sort of area, so let's be intentional, because it could be a big stuff up if we don't give some thought to that.
What I love about that is it gives the person like permission to be different to what they'd normally say. So when they start throwing ideas out in that meeting, instead of people going like, oh, that was weird for you to say, you know, it's like, well, you know, openly, you know, we've given each other permission to think differently on this. That's so interesting.
And you can also ask people who you know are strong to dial that up. So again, that gives them permission to be a little bit more forthright on what they're thinking, because they might not otherwise be that. And so you're just giving them permission by saying, we really need you to dial up that
part of you.
Yeah, that's right. Good. And I would say that the other thing that leaders can do to foster this environment is to facilitate a meeting well. You know, so when you have, because, you know, you've got your extroverts and your introverts, and quite often your introverts will have amazing things to say because they're just taking it all in, you know, putting it through their nice deep thinking filter. And yet if you don't ask them, they may not say anything. So facilitating that meeting well, making sure that everyone has airtime is really important.
Everyone has a voice. So interesting.
I'm writing so many notes.
Like, I will be listening back to this a lot and drawing the gold from it.
Free session.
I know. I'm like, how lucky are we? How lucky are we? Yeah, it's good. You say you were camp mother at Vend. I saw this on the website or through something. What does that title bring up for you?
Interesting, really interesting question. It's complicated. Complicated. So people loved that I was camp mother at Vend, and very much, you know, that because I'm a real nurturer of people, so that 100% went to that sort of nurturing side, looking after people, taking an interest in people. You know, and looking really, like genuinely looking after people.
Yeah, really caring.
That's right. But so I loved that aspect of it. But there was another aspect of it which I found difficult, which was that it was kind of a less than thing. Like try calling, I don't know, the director of sales.
Camp mother or camp father.
That's right. Wow. So whilst it worked in the context of everything at the time, if someone wanted me to be called camp mother these days, I wouldn't.
Did it start when you guys were were small and starting
very
out?
small.
Yeah.
Very small.
Totally.
So it sort of made sense at the time.
Totally.
And actually, and then I changed it anyway.
Yes.
So it did change.
Yeah.
It did change.
Yeah.
But I think as, you know, okay, so if you view it within the patriarchy, you know, like it's a real less than thing.
Yeah.
So I think that, yes, it was nice. I would always fulfill a role like that. It also kind of, you know, actually a lot of the stuff that was going on was kind of deep strategic work about, you know, how we're going to set up offices and how are we going to employ people overseas and how are we going to scale our culture and how are we going to, you know, create this right thing through the psychological safety and accountability and all this kind of stuff. And so that doesn't speak to any of that.
Yeah, that title doesn't.
Yeah. So that's why I say it's complicated.
Yeah, well, I've experienced it with someone here at the Ice House in my team, and you know, for her, it's exactly what you're saying, Mel. You know, she's proud as punch to be referred to as that by some people,
yes,
but not by others.
Yes,
because it's the intention of why they call her that.
Yeah.
That is exactly what it is. Yes, exactly. And so
because some say it with respect and admiration, and some say it as if it's a less than job.
Yes, that's right. And so exactly. And so I know that you know, especially building Vend, and I think even today, you know, ages on from when I left, that heart, that's kind of real sort of heartfelt stuff, I think is still there. Certainly was last year. And it's that kind of how do you describe it? It's a real, it's kind of like
It's a soul.
it's a soul thing. Yeah, exactly. So that's invaluable, right? That's really, really
kind of that critical fiber piece of
that's
And that
right.
doesn't come from nowhere.
No.
You know,
No,
that's-
by chance.
and it doesn't happen by chance at all. And that perception of less than is actually more than important.
Yeah, that's right.
To
exactly. Yeah.
The soul and the success of a business.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, and it's very difficult, you know, like I said before, it's impossible to tell the Vend story without the Mel story because it wasn't really a job, you know. And so you know, you wouldn't have hired someone and called them cat mother. That wouldn't have happened.
Totally. Yeah.
It was the fact that Vaughan and I were doing it together, and I was Vaughan's wife, that made sense at that time. But then when I was trying to step in to be, you know, to make more of that strategic contribution, then that's when I didn't like it so much.
Totally.
But I did like it for that soulness, that kind of understanding. So even now, you know, I still get people, you know, or especially when Vend sold, you know, last year, I had a number of people come out of the woodwork and say how instrumental that was, and just having me there to look after everyone.
I
really.
bet.
The constant.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Lovely.
The glue.
The glue. We talked about it a bit, you know, having swims in cold water and that sort of thing. But any practical advice to have courageous conversations? Like, how do you prep for it? Mentally, what setting? How do you have them? Yeah, this is a good one. How do you have them effectively over Zoom? Or a board meeting? Any sort of practical advice around actually having courageous conversations?
Heaps.
Great.
Yes. So I think first of all, you need to understand. First of all, you need to get yourself in the right space, right? So I think that there's kind of 3 ways to approach a courageous conversation. A, you can ignore it. and hope it goes away.
What happens when you ignore it?
Well, nothing in the short term,
Yeah.
which is why people do it. But in the longer term, not great things happen. You know, your toxic environments, festering issues. You go home at night knowing that you haven't done this thing that runs around in your head. Yeah. Or you can go to war with them. So you can lose your shit and go in and let them have it. Neither of those are particularly
great.
helpful. Right, yeah. Or you can go and explore, right? So this is where you want to be. You want to be exploring to find the outcome, because the truth is always somewhere in the middle. You know?
Nice.
So how do you do that? Well, first of all, what you need to do is you need to understand what is your purpose for having the conversation. So in the coaching that I do, sometimes I'll go, what's the purpose of you having this conversation? And they'll tell me, and I'll go, sweet as, awesome, let's move on. Other times this can be a half an hour conversation.
Wow.
Because you need to understand what you are hoping to achieve at the end of the conversation, which means that paradoxically you need to start at the end of the conversation, right? Even before you start it at all. What are you hoping to achieve? Do you want a change in behaviour? Do you want to, like, you know, send a warning shot across someone's bowels? Are you trying to rebuild a relationship? What are you trying to do? And is this conversation the best way of doing it? But, you know, and importantly, if it is a conversation that you need to have, understanding the purpose will help you realise the tone, how you need to prepare for it, and all that kind of stuff. So I always say to people, if you only have time to do one thing to prepare, get clear on your purpose.
Yeah, great practical tip.
And then I think that after that you need to think about the other person. So you know yourself, you know what you want to say, but what do they care about? How do they think about things? How are you going to tie this thing in that you want to talk about, that's difficult to talk about, in with something that they care about? So stopping to think about them will make it infinitely easier, because you're going to step into their shoes, you're going to get a bit of empathy going. How, you know, are they a straight shooter? Are you going to have to, like, step out of your comfort zone and say things more directly? Or actually do they, like, beat around the bush and do a bit airy-fairy conversations, in which case you might want to, you know, not be too direct. So thinking about all that sort of stuff. And then I think in the conversation, being really clear about your internal experience. So, you know, before we were talking about how you might be at the table, having a seat at the table, but all these stories are running around in your head. So having awareness of that, and having an awareness of how you are experiencing that conversation almost physiologically, so that you can then generate that courage that you need to say the things that need to be said. So that's a big part of it. Not waffling. So being really clear about what you want to say, which, you know, is important. And then listening, because, you know, a lot of people, they ask a question and then they just they're not really interested in listening at all.
No.
They're just
getting ready to ask the next one.
Have you ever had this one, Liz, where they ask a question, and then they answer it? Yes. So asking a question and then actually listening to what they say is actually quite a rare leadership skill. But, you know, the answer always lies in the middle between these two people.
It's interesting when you say that, because I mean, if you've ever watched really good interviewers, like, and I'm probably talking television interviewers, they're really comfortable with silence.
Oh yeah.
Right? They don't. They ask a question and then they shut up.
That's right.
And it's okay.
So top tip for that, I agree. If you're going to ask a question, do not be the one to break the silence. Just don't do it.
Give people time. If it's a good question, the other person has the right to have a bit of time to think about the answer.
Yeah. So what I do is I count to 10 in my head. So this is what it looks like. Okay? Are you ready?
I'm ready.
That was 10.
That made me feel like
I know. Wasn't that uncomfortable? Yeah, that's right. It's really uncomfortable.
So
but you know what? I was very happy because I was counting to 10. You might have been uncomfortable, but I was happy because I was counting to 10.
Wow.
So this is if you ask a question, just count to 10, and then your brain, it'll get to 6 and go, oh, I've still got 7, 8, 9, and 10 to go. And then the other person, they don't know that's what you're doing. So that's a lovely little way to practice being comfortable with
And
silence.
you can almost say, well, clearly, you need some time to think about the answer to that question. So
that's okay.
It's okay. Let's come back to it.
Yeah,
or let's talk about it again tomorrow. Or
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But our tendency is they get uncomfortable. They can't answer the question, so
we want to help them.
That's right. To make ourselves feel better, comfortable. Yeah, I want this bad feeling to go away, so I'm going to say something. Well, just don't. Just count to 10. Yeah, and honestly, in all of my time of doing this, which has been a long, long time, I think only once. I think once I got to like 9.5 before they said something. Normally you're at 3, 4. Yeah.
It's so challenging because it's so easy just to be like blah 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 blah. blah. I'm so guilty of that.
Not comfortable in those moments of silence.
But I think the other thing about this courageous conversations, like so prepping for it mentally, getting clear on your purpose. Having a swim or change your state. Thinking about what state do I need to be in to have this conversation successfully. But also a really great piece of advice is to just start with the words I've noticed or I'm curious about. Those are two really good. Those are like what I call explore. This explore language. I've noticed this thing that I'd like to talk about, or I'm curious about this thing. Really nice way to open a conversation and set the tone.
I've used that a few times, and it works beautifully.
Yeah, that's right.
And you're not trying to manipulate the situation, but it just makes the person feel more comfortable.
So that's right, because the sort of neuropsychology of it is that we all have brains in our heads.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
They're always there.
That's right. And people, pretty much everyone, if they're human, will get defensive. I do it, everyone will do it, right? And if you are kind of have done a lot of work on this stuff, you'll be able to dial down that defensiveness quickly and try and get yourself into a listening state. But if someone is defensive for half an hour or so, that's kind of normal. So what we're trying to do for their brains is we're trying to minimise the extent to which their brains get defensive, or minimise the extent to which they go into this amygdala hijack, which is this fight, flight, freeze and appease mode. So that's why we start with the words like I've noticed or I'm curious about, because the alternative might be I need to talk to you about something, right? And immediately, that's right, they're putting up this big wall, this big defensive wall that's going to make it very difficult for them to access that problem solving, that genuine collaboration. They can't think straight when they're in that kind of situation. So we're not sort of manipulating them, but we're using our knowledge about how the human brain works to try and get them into a state where they can help us solve this problem.
I had a boss that used to start doing stuff. Now, I know this is going to make you defensive.
I feel like that's a great way to start.
Damn straight it is.
So funny. Oh my god.
Good start.
So, in terms of Zoom, what I recommend is definitely always use your camera. So, if they don't have their camera on, then ask them to put their camera on. it would make it easier for me if you would put your camera on. Is that something that you could do?
It's a great line.
And if they say no, then that's fine, but ask. Then hide your self view so that you are not distracted by yourself. So that then also that makes them bigger. So
it also makes you look at the not down.
Yeah. So you can hover over your video and hide your self view. So get rid of yourself. And then, what I do, I don't normally close down all of my other applications because I have my computer's bursting with everything. But I maximise normally I do it over Zoom or Teams. I maximise that window so that I can't see anything else behind it. Again, just to minimise the distractions. I take my phone and I don't put my phone on my desk, so I might put it on the ground or at least turn it upside down. And then for me, it's like a meditation on that other person, because here we're in the same room together, and so I can see more of you. But when you're on Zoom, you only have a smaller window, so you've got really your facial expressions and not much body language. I play this fun game sometimes on Zoom when I'm talking about the importance of how little you can tell, and I go like this. So you can't play this, so I go like this. I go, what am I doing outside of the screen? And then I go like this to them. And for our listeners, I'm flipping the bird. It's a very funny way. You never know. You never ever know what's happening outside of the frame.
So true.
So you just have to focus in on their face and look for things like when they open up their mouth as if they're going to say something and then close it again. Maybe you were going to say something then.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Or if you don't know all of these things that you should be looking out for, look for changes where something has changed with them, and ask a question.
Yeah, wow, that's good.
Yeah,
meditation on that person. Love that.
Yeah,
you'll get better at recognizing emotion in people's faces.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, remember the session that we do on Manager that's focused on that.
Yes.
Being able to read emotion, that's come into play big time since with Zoom and Teams when all we can see more or less is someone's face.
That's right. Yeah, for sure.
How do you know when they're feeling sadness or anger or contempt? Not a good one.
No. Yeah.
So what led to Wisdom at Work, which is your coaching and consultancy that you run now? And what excites you about the future of that?
What led me to? I just.
You've got a whole lot of wisdom that you need to share. That is evident.
When I left Vend, I wanted to work for myself. And I kind of had this epiphany. I had this kind of coming to Jesus moment because I'd always wanted to properly work for myself. And so I had decided I wasn't going to stay at Vend for I was separated, it'd be a bit weird, etc., etc. So I thought, you know what? I thought about it for a bit. I went on holiday and did a lot of thinking and blah blah blah. Then I came home, and I was in front of the fridge, about to open the fridge, and I yelled out, "Fuck it!" And I was like, fuck it. If I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it.
Yeah.
And in that exact moment, I had decided that I was going to start my own business.
So good. I love that it was opening the fridge.
Not like
no glamorous moment.
Looking out to the ocean.
Opening that fridge.
Opening the fridge and I was like, fuck it.
And this is it.
If I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. And my mum was like, are you sure it's a good idea, what if people don't pay their bills? And I was like, no, I'm just going to do it, that's it. I had my fuck it moment, it's happening. And so then I just, and then I started my business by I had a big network, and I'm good at talking. So I went and talked to people in my network about this, and then people started giving me some work, and then I just started my own business. And so what excites me about it now is that I get to go and spread my special flavour of wisdom in the world. And people seem to like the things that I have to say. Well, the ones that I come across anyway. I'm sure there's some people that think I'm a lunatic.
Only if they saw you in your jandal.
That's right.
And you've got to see, I mean, this, it's always been important. It's always been important, but it has never been more important, I don't think, than it is right now to create organizations where the people experience, the employee experience is the best it can possibly be.
Yeah.
Because people have a choice where they want to work, and they're exercising that choice more.
Oh, that's right, absolutely.
I mean, you know, again, not everyone, you know, some people, you know, have to do what they have to do. But increasingly, people are making choices.
Oh, that's right, exactly. And like the Great Resignation that's upon us, right? And even, I mean, let's be honest, even great workplaces are having massive churn, just because of the environment that we're in at the moment. But, you know, and it's kind of freaky as well, you know, because you hire someone into your organisation, and let's say you're paying them $100,000. Let's say you're paying them $200,000, which is a lot of money. And, you know, to put that into perspective, a company has got to sell a lot of whatever they're selling in order to pay for this person. It's like the money doesn't just kind of grow on trees. You know, they have to go and generate this revenue in order to pay this big amount of money. And what an enormous waste if that person is really stymied from doing their best work because you don't trust them, or they're not allowed to work in the way that they want to work. Like, why the hell are you paying them $200,000 if you're going to then treat them like you don't trust them, or
put a whole lot of rules in place that
it just doesn't make any sense. If that's what you want to do, then you should hire someone for less money who you don't need to think. That's right. And there's nothing wrong with that. If that's what you want to do, then knock yourself out. But just don't deceive yourself that you need the you know, the heavy hitters, and then put them in an environment where they can't thrive, because really the fool in that situation is the leader. Which is why I think, you know, Startup 101, hire people smarter than you.
Yes.
And is that easy to do? No. You know, is that comfortable? No. But, you know, for all of the hits that your ego takes, I always think, well, at least I'm the smart one because I hired you. So, you know, you might like daily, you might make me feel like, oh my God, you're amazing. You know, you're so much cleverer at this than I am. But at least I've got you working for me. You know?
So 30, 40, 50K a year resources deserve to be in environments that allow them to be the best they can be.
Everyone.
Everyone. And, you know, if you, I don't know who said this, but if you're putting rules in place to manage the lowest common denominator in your organisation, you've got a problem. You know, manage that person and that, you know, person's performance, but don't put rules in place so that, you know, everybody else is constrained by something that they don't need to be constrained by.
Well, that's so right, true. Exactly. I mean, everyone, everywhere deserves to be in a place of work that, at the very least, respects them as a human being.
Everyone should have a seat at the table.
That's right. Yeah. Exactly. And because everyone has got something to contribute. And it's an absolute waste, you know, and you see it, unfortunately, all too often, where someone will come into an organisation with a lot of great ideas and then they'll just be beaten down. And he was like, well, why are you even employing that person? Why don't you just get like some other person that doesn't have all the great ideas that could just do your ideas for you?
Honestly, like hanging on to every word that you say. Seriously, this has been such an incredible conversation. But want to finish on this question. One person that's been influential in your journey that you'd like to thank.
So I'm going to have two people.
Great. I love that. I love that. It's a theme.
So one person was like my first proper boss when I was started out in HR, Naomi Johnson. She's since retired. But I was working at diagnostic laboratories back in the day, and then we went through a merger with MedLab and became Diagnostic MedLab, I think. And this was back, I'd only just come out of uni. And she just sent me out to this laboratory with, I don't know, a couple of hundred people there, and just put me in charge of doing the HR stuff. And she was always there to support me, but just kind of let me at it. And so that was great for, you know, building my confidence and stuff like that. And then the other person I would say is my friend Sandra, who I met.
We love Sandra.
Yeah, Sandra is great. I met her about 2 years ago during the first lockdown, and she has just, I just love the way she thinks about things. And she has, you know, she's kind of really got me interested in this whole future of workspace. She's like, working with her has radically improved my facilitation skills. Plus, I'm kind of leaning more into this kind of sort of alternative way of looking at things. I now have crystals on my desk when I do coaching in case I want one. It's there. I don't really, you know, I just sort of have them there. And I've got so much from our friendship, like personally and professionally. And she's kind of challenging me to, she probably doesn't know this, but she's kind of challenging me to continue the evolution of me. So I would say those two people. Yeah, and of course, 100% my daughters.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, for sure. Who amaze me every day. Normally in a good way.
Mostly in a good way.
Yeah. Okay, ladies. Well, I'm going to ask the last question. So,
taking over.
Taking control. Let's go.
Out of everything we've talked about today, either whether I've said it or it's come out of someone else's mouth, what's your biggest takeaway in terms of this whole seat at the table or anything else that we've talked about?
Can I start?
Please.
I'm going to go back to the beginning or nearer the beginning. You know, there's a lot, Mel, and you know that you've said that, you know, I'm kind of scribbled. But the difference between having a seat at the table and leaning into that seat at the table.
Yes.
So sitting there and is one thing, but being passive means that it makes no difference that you're at the table. And so that differentiation. And I know it takes courage. And I know our self-talk sometimes is all about what people are going to think if I say what's on my mind right now. But the importance of tuning that down and turning up the volume that says, just give it a go.
Yeah. Cool.
That's cool. For me, it's that there's heaps of things because you talked about the different hats, and I need to go away and think about that. But the experiment of just saying it in a meeting and seeing what happens and being okay with silence, and that was a real challenging thing for me because I do 3 podcasts as part of who I am. So a big part of that is having conversations with people, and I'm so guilty, especially over Zoom when I know there's technical stuff, to be filling gaps, to be talking, and I realised this is for me, not them. This is for me to feel comfortable in this conversation, not them. So that was amazing. But yeah, just that whole experiment, just say it, see what happens, give yourself grace. That self-compassion thing was massive for me. So I think that's like a million things. Yeah. And that.
And I have to say, I love the I'm just a goof.
Yeah.
Because isn't that just so cool sometimes to go, I don't need to put on any graces.
Yeah.
I'm just a goof.
Yeah.